Hey, would you like a PDF of all the Old Soul, New Soul podcast episodes since we started the show? Well, it's under the Freebies tab on funastrology.com. Go grab yours now. Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast. Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock, and one of your questions about something that is very relevant right now, the 29-degree mark in the chart in Pisces.
I have a question about the last degree of Pisces. That's where my Mars is. And I've heard a lot about, since Pisces is the last planet of the zodiac and that Mars is the last, is that such a late degree. Does that mean that I should be some kind of a wizard or something? Or does that have anything to do with reflecting this being the last time I will reincarnate on this planet, being that it's Mars? Right now, Neptune is sitting on my Mars, and I'm really curious what Robert has to say about that 29-degree Mars in Pisces. Thank you very much, and I love your podcast.
I love listeners' questions because they always take these podcasts down totally unexpected avenues like this one. Thomas and I would probably never have come up with this, but you did. Couple of things. 29 degrees is what's called an anaretic degree in astrology. It's a critical degree. There's something in astrology called the developmental arc, and all you have to do to find your own developmental arc is to list your planets and points, including the ascendant and the midheaven and the part of fortune, in their order of degrees, starting with the planet at the earliest degree, and list them all, and ending with the planet at latest degree. And that's called your developmental arc. And when you have that, you now have a listing of the order in which each archetype is triggered anytime a planet enters a new sign, whether it's the sun, which will do that, it'll do the whole developmental arc in 1 year, or the planet Saturn, which will trigger that developmental arc in order over a 2.5-year period. So knowing that, this listener's Mars is probably the last planet in her developmental arc, which means she ends everything with Mars in Pisces. And that's a double sign, as you know. It's got a negative, like all signs do. It's a negative and positive sign. Should I be a wizard? You can laugh, but that's not a bad idea. With her Mars in Pisces. Mars in Pisces is, if that's the way she ends everything, what starts at the beginning of her developmental arc winds up with Mars of action in Pisces, a notoriously indecisive sign, but it's also an incredibly mystical and spiritual sign, so that she will almost be forced throughout her life to go deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to solve and resolve the challenges and sometimes even tragedies that she's faced with. And they can be of a Piscean nature. There may even be confusion about her birth parents, her birth circumstances. There can be alcohol or drug issues in her background. There can be issues of serious illnesses in her family with which she has to cope. These can be mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical illnesses. Mars in Pisces makes her a natural healer. And this is and she has been a healer in many past lives. I love her question. Does this mean this is the last incarnation I'm going to have? Probably not. Because we all have as many infinite incarnations as we wish for whatever developmental soul purposes we might have. But in this life, she is actually born with Mars in this late anorectic degree of Pisces, which suggests that she has had many lifetimes as a healer. And she has healing abilities in this lifetime. Doesn't mean she's going to go to medical school necessarily, And probably not at whatever age she is now. That's a decision most of us would make in our 20s. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't still have genuine healing abilities. And because she does, if she's unaware of those, troubled people will find her throughout her life, and she will find them. It can all be unconscious, because troubled people intuitively will recognize in her the ability to help them. So she might find herself falling in love with people who have some serious problems, friendships that may have some serious issues. And those can range from anything like bad habits to even criminality. She is a natural healer now, with Mars associated with work. She might find her true calling in a spiritual or metaphysical or healing profession. And it can certainly be self-employment. Astrology could be one. Spiritual healing could be another one. Psychic healing could be another one. Psychometry, mediumship, goes on and on. But she will be drawn to those things over and over because she doesn't get answers in real life. And the only place she will is if she begins to delve into these psychological, spiritual, metaphysical healing modalities. Then she will begin to find answers. So I don't know if that helps or makes sense to her, but it's certainly something to consider, and I love that she brought this to us.
Yeah, and that was a great question, and hopefully that does help. I'd like to take it a step further, and let's bring it out to everybody now. What can we learn about 29-degree placements? I know some people have them, some people don't. What all should we know about 29 degrees in any sign?
Great question again. And again, use your own reason to think about these things, because you can answer a lot of these questions yourself. You see a planet, any planet, that's in late degree. The later the degree, the greater the implication is that this soul has developed that planet and the sign that it is in over several lifetimes. So potentially it can be highly developed. And therefore, something in terms of its archetype by planet and sign that they can tap into consciously and develop in this lifetime to a very high and reliable degree. And we were just talking about her Mars at 29 Pisces, but it can be anything. It could be your moon at a very late degree of a sign, so that you've developed the lunar qualities of caregiving and empathy and nurturing and nourishing and so on, and even maybe parenting to a high degree in past lives. Now, that doesn't mean it's all been rosy in those areas, but you have had many experiences. That's just the theory. The later the degree of the planet, the more acquaintance with that planet's meaning that soul has had. And then depending on the house in this life, where that planet in a late degree falls, then you can use the past life development of that planet in those house matters to achieve a great deal, actually. And then you can begin to look and see what house or houses that planet in a late degree rules. So, for example, the sun, which is the life force, in a late degree of any sign, is one indication of a longer than average life, just simply because it's in a later degree than average. If it's afflicted, then it may not be. If it's in a sign like Aries, for example, Aries people are notorious for somehow contributing to their own deaths. Now, if you know that from astrological history and tradition, you can alleviate it by not contributing to your own death through bad habits. If the planet in a late degree happens to rule the 8th house of death in a person's chart, that's another indication of longer than average life, death later in life. Let's say you have Aries or Scorpio on the 8th house. and you have Mars at 29 Pisces. Well, Aries or Scorpio on the 8th rules death in their life. Mars rules that. It's in a late degree. Ergo, death later in life. So you can make use of the degrees in that sense. Planets in very early degrees may be immature in this life, in the sense that this may be their soul's first acquaintance on a new thread of lifetimes involving that planet in a very early degree. If you have the moon in a very early degree, for example, you may be emotionally immature in this life. Doesn't mean that you have to be that way all your life, but that's the implication in the birth chart. And then knowing that, you can take steps to become more emotionally mature with regards to the moon archetype. So you can apply that to any planet.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually very good. And I'd like to just insert this here because we've talked about it before, yet I think it's worth mentioning. If somebody has, you mentioned Aries, the sun at 29 degrees and 54 minutes in Aries, are they an Aries, or can they dabble with being partially a Taurian?
The sun cannot be in two signs at once. It's either in Aries or it's in Taurus. It may be at 29:59 Aries, and the only way you can do that is if you have an exact birth time, and you may have to rectify the chart to get it. Because the ascendant degree, for example, changes 1 degree for every 4 minutes of birth time. You know, we rectified Donald Trump's chart in a practicum I did back in 2017. His time of birth was only off by 4 minutes. But it changed, and the reason we had to do it, had to rectify it, is because he has very late 29 degrees Leo rising. Well, we need to know for sure, does he have Leo rising or Virgo rising? It can't be both. So we had to rectify, and we did. I'm not going through that today. But it turned out his time of birth was only off by 4 minutes. So it still gives him, he definitely has Leo rising and not Virgo. Same with the sun. If it's at 29:59, great. It's either that or it's 0 and 0 of the next sign, or 0 and 1 minute of the next sign. Everybody loves to say they're born on the cusp, but technically the sun cannot be in two signs at once. It's either one or the other. And you need to make sure.
Let me ask it this way, too, because I could imagine somebody is out there saying, well, yeah, but I'm a 29 Aries, but I sure have a lot of Taurian tendencies. So could somebody with a later degree, and let's not even lock on to 29, let's say a later degree sun, for example, that's an easy one to think about because it is our life force. If somebody has a later degree sun, might they have a few more of that next sign's characteristics than somebody that, say, has a 12-degree sun?
Yes, absolutely. But anybody can say that about any sign, and people love to split hairs. But the truth is the sun cannot be in two signs at once. If it's in the last degree and minute of a sign, it still is in Aries. But if you notice, by solar arc, during their first year of life, that late degree Aries sun by solar arc will move into Taurus. Bingo. So their solar arc sun will be in Taurus for the next 30 years. But their birth sun is still in Aries. It's still ruled by Mars. But it advances into Taurus very shortly after birth or during their first year of life, and will stay in Taurus for the next 30 years. So technically, if you're going to be accurate with solar arcs, you have to know where the sun is. But certainly people will absolutely perceive that they have traits of the next sign of the zodiac, simply because the solar arc of that planet could be any planet, because they all move roughly by 1 degree for a year.
You know, all of us have moved times around on charts enough to know that you get to a point. You talk about moving the ascendant by 4 minutes. But when the sun, now you can, like if you're trying to find an exact aspect in the chart and you're clicking it 1 minute at a time, 1 minute, and then you get down to seconds and you click 20 seconds in there, and then boom, it changes that degree and it changes everything. Well, if you are a 29 degree and 50-something minute sun, it would definitely be worth knowing through rectification, because, you click 1 minute literally and you could all of a sudden turn into a Taurus. Well, it's a great question from our listener and a great topic, and something that certainly, if you have that real estate occupied 29 dot something on your chart and you'd like more information about it, the best way to go about that is to contact Robert directly in the show notes for a reading, and he could walk you through and take a look at all of the aspects of that, not only just sitting right there in your chart, but where else it might be tied in. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. And feel free to leave your questions like she did by going to the top of the funastrology.com website and hit the orange button. And we'll see you soon on a future episode. Thanks for listening.